How to add custom firmware to your Midi Fighter 64. The first step is to get Midi Fighter Utility. You're going to need this to load the custom firmware. Next, go into Google and search for Launchpad Utility. It should be this first website. The logo should look like this. When you click this will have a bunch of firmware for a bunch of different launchpads. Click this drop-down menu and click Midi Fighter 64 CFW. CFW stands for custom firmware. Once you click this, you can download the firmware and it tells you how to install this for the 64. After you've downloaded the firmware and installed Midi Fighter Utility, open up Midi Fighter Utility. Now make sure to connect your Midi Fighter 64. Once your Midi Fighter is connected and you have the utility app open, go into Tools, Midi Fighter, Load Custom Firmware for a 64. Then open the .hex file you just downloaded. It will warn you to not use a USB hub, so don't do that, and click Yes. Now it's gonna do the process, just wait for this to finish. Once that's done, sometimes it will just work, but sometimes you have to unplug it and plug it back in. So I'm gonna do that right now. And that worked. If you click Update Firmware, this will take you out of the custom firmware. And now you have custom firmware for your Midi Fighter 64. You can now use Apollo Studio and lights will work better in Ableton. If you want to use this in an Ableton project, go into Options, Settings, or if you're on an older version of Ableton, it will say Preferences. Then here, it should auto-configure everything. Launchpad Pro, then Midi Fighter CFW for input and output. Make sure that you have this set as track and remote. And now it works the exact same as a launchpad. Depending on the project you have, the lights will either be in Ableton or Apollo Studio. From this point forward though, the process is the exact same as using a launchpad. Like and subscribe, please, thanks.